Okay, so I had a bit of a think about what I could talk about when sort of Richard said there were theatre slots still going, and decided I think probably I've talked about stuff like Cashbook and print PDF and locate and so on many times to many people. And I think most people probably know what they are. So I thought I'd have a look through the other bits and pieces that are actually available on my website and talk about some of the other slightly less well-known bits and pieces. For those who aren't aware, I haven't been past my stand today. I'm actually selling CDs named the British Heart Foundation, which contain all of the software that's on my website. They're £5 each. Everything I'm talking about is open source as well, so you can download it for free from my website and make use of it after the event at no cost to yourselves if you prefer to do it that way. So, if you do pick a CD up, you get a collection of files on it. And alongside the main bits and pieces, so there's a few sort of slightly a little more obscure bits of software that some people probably wouldn't be aware of or hadn't come across before. The first one I thought I'd take a look at was an Icon Clipboard, which actually wasn't mine. I kind of rescued it from Thomas Leonard, who developed it back in the 90s, I think. And when he moved on from RISC OS and the Ionics came out, we went 32-bit. I 32-bitted it for my own use on my machine, and then talked to Thomas and said, could I get permission to re-release it and carry on developing it for the platform? And he said, yeah, that wasn't a problem. So he made it available under a public domain license, which is basically do whatever you like with the software. And since then, I've kind of kept it up to date, kept it working on modern machines as things like the Beagleboard and the Raspberry Pi and so on have come out since. So I suppose the first question is, what is it? It comes as a very simple little application you can drop into boot. Full instructions are provided, and the main thing it does is fill a big gap in certainly everything apart from RISC OS 4, the later versions or the select versions of RISC OS 6, in that it provides a global clipboard, cut and paste, copy, all that sort of stuff in writable icons. So with Icon Clipboard actually up and running, and it's permanently installed on my machines, on RISC OS 5, which doesn't normally support this, you can happily find a writable icon. You have to take my word for the fact that I'm pressing Control C there, and I'm just noticing the zap's looking very interesting next to it. It does appear though, I can paste text into other windows. I'm not sure why Zap's coming up with red stripes there, because it definitely isn't on my screen, but you'll have to just bear with me on that, I'm afraid. We can take text the other way as well. So if we type the usual comment in and copy that out of Zap, if it made any sense to do it, I can delete that text and paste it in with a Control-V key press. So it's not a massive utility. It doesn't do huge amounts of things, although it does do a few other little odds and ends that I will come on to in a second. But it's certainly proved invaluable to me in the sort of 10, 15 years that I've been using it, which is one of the reasons why I 32-bitted it for the Ionics all those years ago and contacted Thomas about it. It does have a few little obscure tricks up its sleeve that people may not be aware of. In addition to the standard clipboard operations, if you're playing about with files and file names, such as, let's get rid of that Zap window because it's really quite distracting on the projector. We've got a DOS type file name there. If I do Control-D on that, it actually removes the extension for me. So it DDoSifies, I think is what Thomas referred to it as, the file name. Alternately, if you had a need to keep the extension and change the file name, Control-E will just lose the rest of the file name ready for you to type a new name in. And it has a couple of other little tricks up its sleeve as well, which aren't on by default in the versions that you buy. That you download from my website or buy on the CD today. But if you turn them on, Control-S will start to do the standard case swapping that things like impression do. And the other thing it will do, Control T for today, I think, sticks today's date into any writable icon for you anywhere on the desktop. It's not just file save windows, it's anywhere that's got writable fields like that. And the formatting of that is completely configurable. You can play about with it just as you can do in Alarm when you're setting up field formatting on the icon bar. So as I say, it's not a huge flashy utility, but it just sits there quietly in the background, and certainly until the bounty for bringing clipboard support into writable icons gets fulfilled on the rule sort of developments for the RISC OS 5, it's still a very useful utility for anybody using the 32-bit branch of the operating system at the moment. Icon Clipboard, the module, always used to be bundled by Thomas with a bit of a demonstration application, which I broke out and separated, and it's available for download separately, called Clipboard. Again, it's not a huge or very complicated utility, but it just gives you access to the clipboard via a little window, so you can save the file, save the contents out, or access it. So at the moment, it's telling me there's a zap over the clipboard because I just cut some text from a zap window. I can save that to disk, and we should find it was the text that I copied earlier. So you can always access whatever's on the clipboard and save it out to file if you ever need to. And it just sits there and monitors the clipboard in the background. So those are two utilities that I rescued, say about 15 years ago now. It's quite a while. I should probably add, if anyone's got any questions as we go through this, it's going to be a fairly sort of quick run through a lot of different things. If anyone's got any questions or anything I'm covering, it's probably best to ask while we're going along rather than wait till the end, just because it will probably keep the thread running a bit more. In addition, there's a page on my website which is dedicated to random utilities that didn't really fit in anywhere else, which have grown up sort of randomly and fairly kind of haphazardly as I've found the need to write things. One of the utilities which sits on my computers pretty much all the time, just quietly in the background, is a little utility called WinScroll, which again is a small module that you can stick into your boot sequence. It comes just as an application that again you can drop into inside boot, so it runs when the machine starts up, and it performs one function and one function only. If you hold down Control and click Menu over a window, you can then drag it like what you can on Windows when you have applications like Word and Excel, where you can just effectively pan around a page using the mouse, and it works for any window on RISC OS. And I sort of wrote that because I found myself trying to do it automatically because that's what all Windows applications that I use day to day at work did, and I found I missed it on RISC OS.
Will it sideways scroll as well?
It will do, yes, if I make that a bit smaller. Yeah, you can scroll sideways, diagonally, whatever. If it picks up the scroll bars, so a file window, for example, only has up and down because you've only got one scroll bar on it.
What's the title again?
It's called WinScroll for Window Scroll. I'm not sure if it's actually got a. I think it might. I'm not sure. It might be called Window Scroll on my website, but it's the actual application name itself is WinScroll. Another utility that keeps popping up in discussions every now and again online is a utility called getfiler, which again was written to plug a gap in the operating system. Because for those who can remember far enough back, RISC OS used to have a menu entry down here in the switcher called Save Desktop, and you could save that out, and it would save a whole load of useful stuff that would break your boot sequence. And it would also save out all the positions of all the filer windows. And when it got removed, because the only useful thing in it really was the filer windows, Acorn, I think, removed it, carefully left or helpfully left inside the file all the functionality to actually do this saving. And so it seemed like a useful opportunity to come along and to plug the gap and get a file that does one thing and one thing only. Sits on the other bar, you can click it, save out your file positions, and then you've got a nice little obey file that will set up all your file windows as they were when you saved it. That works fine on RISC OS 5, it works fine on RISC OS 4. It doesn't work on RISC OS 6 because RISC OS Limited took the code out of the file on that version. So I'm afraid that's not supported, but it works fine on all the other versions of RISC OS. Just working through what to drop from this since I'm making a slightly shorter talk than I was originally planning to do. Another little utility which came up, because one of the things that seems to exercise RISC OS users quite a lot is the way that the delete key, the end key, the backspace key operate on our operating system. And I think it depends very much on whether you use Windows more than RISC OS or RISC OS more than Windows, or whether you didn't use RISC OS before it got changed by Castle when the Ionics came out. But whether delete deletes backwards or forwards seems to be quite a contentious issue. And I have to admit, I've always liked the Windows way of doing things because it's what I'm familiar with on every other computer platform I use. And so quite early on, quite early on actually with the RISC, when I had a RISC PC running whatever Acorn had at the time, I wrote a couple of little bodges that tried to fix this across the operating system. Then RISC OS Limited sorted it out in RISC OS 4, kind of. And then Castle came along with RISC OS 5, told everybody they were going to do it the PC way anyway, and left a whole load of applications kind of high and dry, behaving in different ways. So I sat down and revisited what I'd done and came up with a little module called PC Keyboard, which again is always sat installed on all of my computers because it is basically invaluable. And again, I'm afraid it's another one of these utilities that comes along as an addition to boot. So you just have to drop it in to boot. Again, instructions are given. And if you're using RISC OS 5 and you're happy with the Windows way of working, then all you're actually needing to do is fix individual applications that predate RISC OS 5 coming out, and Castle saying swap the use to delete backspace over. So PC Keys is simply configured to pick up on those applications that don't comply with how the operating system works and change the keys around. So for instance, here's Ovation, which was 32-bit by Rick Murray a while ago. Those who read the rule forms will be aware of that. So I've got some text in there, a little bit small, but pressing backspace is deleting to the left as you'd expect. Pressing delete is also deleting to the left, as I wouldn't expect, because I'd like it to delete the other way. And what I can do with PC Keys, having found that, is actually configure it to know about Ovation, so that it will then try and swap the keys around for me to make them behave in a more sensible way. So it's a little bit of a manual process, but it is explained in detail in the documentation. Oops. So if we go and find out what Ovation is called as an application, it turns out it is called Ovation, surprisingly enough. I can just add it to the list of things that PC Keys knows about. I might want to save that somewhere else. You can run this from a zip file as long as you have a read-write version of SparkFS. And backspace is now backspacing, but delete is now deleting the other way, which is what you'd expect to be consistent with the operating system. And That served me well for a number of years, and I was quite happy with that. But then it became apparent that not everybody was, because there were still people who violently opposed to the idea of actually following the Windows route and wanted to get RISC OS 5 to behave like the RISC PC had done. And after I'd received probably 20 emails from various annoyed people saying, well, why can't you just make it work the other way for us? I sat down and worked out what it would actually require to do, which was actually a fair bit of extra work, and released an update. So if you're sitting there in the moment and listening to this thinking, why on earth would you want your computer to work the Windows way? PC keys is still potentially interesting to you, because if... let me out of that. Let's try and discard that, don't I? Because if you don't like the modern Ionix Castle RISC OS 5 way of doing delete, backspace, you can simply go to the config file, and again this is all documented thoroughly in the manual, comment out the configuration that does that, uncomment 3 lines just further down, save it, drop it into your boot sequence, and that will now turn all of your writable icons back the other way, back into the old Acorn style. It will turn your ROM applications, things like edit and so on, that comes part of the operating system, back the right way. So everything that's hard-coded to behave in a Windows style will now behave in the old Acorn style, if that's what you prefer. I believe there's quite a few people, I personally don't use it very much, apart from testing, but I believe there's quite a few people out there who are happily using that and find it quite a handy addition. The man at the back there. And if you find, I'm just looking down the list there, obviously you can now add applications which are hard-coded to the RISC OS 5 style in as special cases to be treated. And the one I can't show you, if you're using RISC OS 3, 4 or 6, and you want to change the behaviour back to the Ionix version, again there's a set of lines you can comment at the bottom there that will do that, although it's a bit hard to demonstrate because I've got RISC OS 5 here. But again, it's one of those little utilities that just sits there in the background of my machine and just gets on with what it needs to do, basically. I'm conscious that we're starting to run out of time a little bit, so I will move on very briefly to another little section of the CD. A long time ago, way back in the 1990s, when I was a student, in fact before I was a student as well, I started out with RISC OS application writing, producing little games and things like that that looked a bit like things that I saw in the magazines. When back in the days when you actually had to write off the PD software and it might return, several weeks later or whatever, it was often easier to just roll your own version of things rather than actually sending off for the discs. And a couple of years ago, I went back through all these. They'd all been on my website for a while, and I actually updated them so that they behaved in a modern kind of RISC OS style. So they fitted in with the rest of the stuff that comes on a modern computer. They would conform to the RISC OS 5 style guide and that sort of thing. The first one I looked at was noughts and crosses, which, as you might expect, plays noughts and crosses. And it's one of those ones where I think most people know the algorithm is fairly predictable. You will pretty much be able to always force the computer to draw as long as you play the correct sequence of games as you can, or moves as you can with most of these. But what I also had on the website, which I don't anymore because it became sort of obsoleted, was a single tasking basic program which played 3D noughts and crosses, which was always a bit more challenging. I thought it'd be quite nice to roll that into the desktop, so I did. And if we do that and play a new game, we've now got 3 grids, and they appear side by side, but they're effectively stacked on top of each other, so you can play sort of diagonally down through the board, or that's straight down the middle of the cube, effectively. And this becomes a bit more interesting because suddenly the computer's got all manner of weird ways that it can possibly win, he says, trying to work out what the computer's doing. There we go, the computer's won. So that sort of rolled the two little programs into one and produced one sort of fairly modern style compliant little game for the desktop. Other titles that got written, there was Solitaire, which was the real Solitaire. Drag the little pegs around, and you're supposed to be able to clear it down to one peg, but I don't think I can ever actually remember how to do that. And possibly one of the more interesting ones, just because of the history of it, was a game that came a little bit later, that again got upgraded a bit, and actually had some discussions with a couple of users about this one. And it reproduces the game of finding the pairs of cards. So we've got a collection of cards on there. There are loads of paired images, which you can, and if you can turn two cards over with the same image, you clear them off, and then the person who gets the most pairs by the end of the game wins. They're obviously not. But it was possible to use different images. I mean, these ones are all RISC OS file sprites. We can make it use pictures, start a new game, and it's a little bit more conventional now. So you end up with little images there. But the interesting thing about this game is after I'd released it initially, just because it was written, it was quite fun to write, and I thought people might find it useful. I got an email from a special needs teacher who I think was in Leeds. I think he was in Leeds at the time that I was in Edinburgh, but I could be wrong on that. He came back and said, I've been looking at pairs quite a lot, and it's quite useful, but it would be really good if it could do a few extra things, because it would actually mean I could use it in the classroom. So we corresponded about various issues. Can't remember all the details that I changed. It's probably all documented in the manual somewhere. But one of the things we added was sound files, so that you can actually add sound samples to each card image. And he found that helped his pupils memorise the card images better and work with it if they had a sound and a picture that they could connect together. I don't think I've actually got any card sets that do that to hand, because sort of functionality was added, and then this teacher did most of the work himself with it. But you can turn, if you've got Play It available on the machine, you can turn the sounds on, and then it suddenly adds this extra sort of aspect to the game. And I believe, I don't know if he's still using it, but I know he was using it for quite a few years. That's quite a useful classroom tool, which was pretty gratifying, really, for something that I knocked together, just to have a bit of fun one weekend. So one final thing just to finish off with, is I know I'm running short of time. Again, back in the days when it was all the rage to write your own interactive help applications, and just before RISC OS 4 came out with its own bubble help, I wrote an application called Float, which again I know a few people have seen and are using, and it behaves in just the same way as you'd expect from any other interactive help application, with a couple of little twists. You can control how the panes open and close, as you'd expect. Have them close automatically after a given time once it thinks you've read them, if you don't move the mouse about. But a couple of things you can do. If you get bored very quickly with the help from the window furniture, you can turn that off. So once you know what the title bar does, you don't need it to tell you that. And once you get, or if you get bored with help over the icon bar icons, you can turn it off as well, so it stops, if you do that, it stops bothering you with information about what the applications do down there. But the other thing you can do, because even for most users of RISC OS, once you've worked out how the filer works, you don't really care about the fact that you can pick items up and drag them, because you know that. So you can start adding applications to the list of tasks that Float will just ignore for you, so it won't actually bore you with the messages once you've learnt it. So if I didn't want to know, for example, how to use the filer every time, because I'd worked that out from the user manual, I could add the filer to the list of ignores, and now it will still tell me about the pin board, but it won't tell me about the filer window. And if I got bored with the pin board because I'd worked out how that works, I could add that as well. And now it'll tell me about its own dialogue, because that's not the pin board, but it won't tell me about the pin board. And so you can customise it quite extensively to make it, to stop it, sort of stop the noise and just produce the useful information that you need to help you use the system and help you use new applications, which is the main purpose of it. I think that pretty much brings me to the end of the time I've got. So it's really just a quick little run through. Oh, that doesn't look good. I may have found a bug that I need to fix. Hopefully that's given you a quick run through some of the slightly more obscure corners of my my software collection. As I say, I'm selling CDs today of everything in aid of British Heart Foundation. They're £5 each, and all of it's open source and freely available from me from my website at any time. Come and have a chat with Sam today, or drop me an email if you want to know any more about any of them. Anyone? Any questions? Yeah.